Hi everyone, I'm here to help you understand the menstrual cycle and how to take care of our reproductive health. Let's start. What do we intend to do in this discussion? The first one is define menstrual cycle. Atong ihatag ang meaning kung unsa ang menstrual cycle. Second, describe the process of menstruation ug atong i-explain, atong i-describe kung unsa ang menstruation. Lastly, appreciate the value of hygiene in our reproductive health. Reproductive, we're talking about the reproductive system. Unsaon nato pag atiman ang atong reproductive health or our atong reproductive system. Let's start. What is menstruation? Menstruation is defined this way: the process of discharging blood and other materials from the lining of the uterus at intervals in about 28 days from the stage of puberty until menopause, except during pregnancy. Except during pregnancy, we will understand better later nganong walay menstruation during pregnancy. Discharging of blood, meaning to say ang paggawas sa dugo gikan sa lawas sa babay o other materials pareha sa lining sa uterus. Lahi ang menstruation o ang menstrual cycle. They are very different. Why? Because menstruation happens for only about 5 to 7 days, but the menstrual cycle lasts for more than 28 days. In other words, menstruation is just the beginning. Menstrual cycle is the beginning of these 28 days of the cycle. Menstrual cycle is defined as the regular period in a woman, which is the sign that reproductive parts, such as the uterus, are working normally and healthy. So, dapat batang mabalaka kung wala nag-menstruation ang babay, labi na kung nana siya sa 13 above na edad, 13 to around 55 years old? Yes, kay kung wala siya giduguan ang time, meaning to say, unhealthy siya or buntis siya. Let's talk more about the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle lasts for 28 days. Sometimes, usually it's 28 days, but sometimes it lasts 21 to 35 days for adults. By adults, we mean to say those who are older. When we say 21 to 45 days, this is for teens. These are for teenagers, meaning to say 13 to 19 years old. Beyond that, lahi na sad ang ilahang number of days. I will explain the 28-day cycle later on. During the menstrual cycle, important hormones such as, sorry, this is typographical error, the FSH or follicle stimulating hormone is released. We also have the LH or luteinizing hormone, the estrogen and progesterone. These hormones are responsible for, first, how the menstrual cycle develops from ovulation until menstruation itself. Mo ni sila ang hinungdan nganong munindot ang skin, nganong magdugo ang lining, nganong ang egg cell mogawas gikan sa follicles o nganong ang follicle mo develop. Ako ning ipakita later on. There are 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. We have the menstrual phase, the follicular phase, the ovulation phase, and the luteal phase. Unsa man ni sila, ma'am? Here is the cycle. So the first one is the menstrual phase. Ang pinakauna nga part sa menstrual cycle kay ang menstrual phase, diin magdugo. The lining of the uterus, as you can see here, will bleed, will shed. The second is the follicular phase. You can see the follicle here. You are going to see that. You will see a bigger illustration of this one later on. And then we have the ovulation phase where the egg cell is now going to travel from the fallopian tube going to the uterus. And that is now being prepared for reproduction. But what if walay sperm cell nga mahitabo og muagi padung sa egg cell, igabot sa egg cell diri. Mauna na ang paghitabo sa luteal phase. In the luteal phase, okay. In the luteal phase, we have the egg cell here, and it will wait for the sperm cell to come. Pero kung walay sperm cell nga moabot, mobalik na punta sa menstrual phase. Ang egg cell kay mahilis or mumelt, and it's going to be shed through menstruation. This is called cycle because this process is in a circular motion. Cycle, beginning with the menstrual, follicular, ovulation phase going to the luteal phase. Balik na pud sa menstrual phase kung walay fertilization or pag-meet sa egg cell o sa sperm cell nga mahitabo. Let's talk about the menstrual phase. Unsa ang naa sa menstrual phase? As you can see in the illustration, we have here the uterus, the lining. There, it looks like this. The uterus sheds its inner lining. So dili lang dugo ang mugawas. Apil na ang egg cell ug ang uban nga part sa lining. And the menstrual fluid, otherwise known as blood, comes out from the cervix area, coming out to the vagina, through the vagina. The menstrual phase takes takes the first to the 5th day. This is also known as the period. Let me define it for you. The uterus sheds its inner lining of soft tissue, that's this part, and blood vessels which exits the body from the vagina in the form of menstrual fluid. Blood loss of 10 ml to 80 ml is considered normal for menstruation. Kung mulapas na gani sa 10 ml to 80 ml, dapat nang magpa-check up sa doktor. Mahibaw-an na sa girls kung grabe ra kayo ang paggawa sa dugo kung mo-spend sila og more than 4 napkins in a day. So kung sigig kapuno ang napkin, sigig ilis more than 4 na for 5 days, magsige siya ilis more than 4 times a day kay sige siya kalapsan, dapat na siya magpa-check up sa doctor. You may experience abdominal cramps, otherwise known as dysmenorrhea. These cramps are caused by the contraction of the uterine and the abdominal muscles to expel the menstrual fluid. So, what's contraction? Ang contraction kay ang pag-move sa muscles sa abdominal area, diri nga area sa body, para ang kaning dugo makagawas. And that contraction is normal. The abdominal cramps are also normal. Naalang giuban nga sakit kaayo, and that is also because of their lifestyle. Later, we will talk about how to minimize dysmenorrhea and how to prepare our body for menstruation. The second phase is the follicular phase. Follicular comes from the root word follicle. I'm sure you have heard of this word already before. Follicle. That's letter E. The follicular phase lasts from day 1 to 13. Medyo mosapaw siya sa menstruation phase. One of these egg cells begins to mature in a sac-like structure called the follicle. Ingon ani ang naong sa follicle. Ang egg cell naa pa siya sa sulod o maginay-hinay siyag mature. It takes 13 days for the egg cell to reach maturity. So maghuwat og 13 days. While the egg cell matures, its follicle secretes a hormone that stimulates the uterus to develop a lining of blood vessels and soft tissue called endometrium. This is the endometrium. Now, you might be wondering why the endometrium is there. Later on, it will serve its purpose. I will show you a video of how the menstruation happens and how the ovulation happens inside the body of a girl. At the start of this stage, the pituitary gland will begin to release more follicle-stimulating hormone, or the FSH. The stimulation, tarugon ani nga hormone, ani nga chemical, ang atoang reproductive system. This will continue for 3 to 4 days. This hormone makes several follicles grow in one of the ovaries. So daghan yun ang follicle. Each follicle contains an immature ova or egg cell. These follicles create estrogen. So again, we have the second hormone now. Usually, the amount of FSH in the body rise during the third or fourth day of menstruation. Only one follicle survives. The one that is left releases even more estrogen. Once again, the lining of the uterus thickens near the end of the stage. A woman's estrogen level increases as well. So kani nga chemical mudaghan ni siya sa lawas sa babay. This causes the pituitary gland to release luteinizing hormone, which also rises at this time. Question, unsay purpose sa luteinizing hormone? Later, we will see that in the video as well. So, just to recap, we're done with the menstrual phase, ang pagdugo sa uterus sa babae. We're done with the follicular phase, diin iandam sa ovaries, ang pagtubo o ang pagmature sa egg cell sa sulod sa clue sa sulod sa follicle. And we have the ovulation phase. Root word for ovulation is ovum. This is letter V, ha? This happens on day 14. Ovulation happens if there is both a rise in the estrogen, so nitaas ang estrogen, and a rise in luteinizing hormone at the end of the follicular stage. Inugdaghan ani nila nga chemical, mahitabo ang ovulation phase. The rising levels of luteinizing hormone or LH makes the ovum mature. The follicle that contains the ovum swells and breaks open. Mutambok siya, unya mabuslot ug mugawas ang ovum. Mauni ang mahitabo. So gikan ang egg cell diri, naay usa ka follicle diri, o pareha anig naong. Okay, mugawas ang egg cell diri ug kuhaon siya sa fimbriae of this part of the reproductive system. The ovum is released into the fallopian tube through the help of this fimbriae, and it takes 3 to 4 days for the egg to travel from the fallopian tube to the uterus. Within 24 hours of ovulation, the egg may unite with a sperm cell. If not, the egg will die. Mamatay ang egg. So, mo-travel siya diri, gikan aning fallopian tube, itukmod siya, aning pipe, aning tube going to the uterus. Observe, nihimong soft ang lining sa uterus, ug ang egg cell during the ovulation phase will stay here. Sa sulod sa 24 hours, dapat kay moabot ang sperm cell. Kung dili gani siya moabot, mahitabo ang bleeding later on. Why are the linings of the uterus softened? This is to prepare for the fertilization of the egg cell. Mubaga ni nga lining kani siya. Kunya diri magstay ang egg cell. Okay, so we have the menstruation phase, we have the follicular phase, and the ovulation phase. Meaning to say, gaandam na sad ang lawas ug bag-o nga egg cell for pregnancy. Pero kay di man mahitabo ang pregnancy, mo nang menstruation. Now, before mahitabo ang menstruation, we have the last phase before we go back to the menstrual phase. The luteal phase, which happens on day 15 to day 28. The follicle cells develop into a structure called corpus luteum, which is the root word for the word luteal, that used to hold the ovum, now release progesterone into the body, ang ikaapat na hormone. This causes the endometrium to get even thicker. So during the luteal phase, mas mubaga ang lining sa uterus. Na mubaga siya. If an ovum is going to be fertilized, it happens during this phase. A woman becomes pregnant when a man's sperm fertilizes one of her ova, which then plants itself into the lining of the uterus. Okay, so the egg cell sits here in the luteal phase. Ug kung naa may mahitabo nga sex, this is normal, this is how you were created. So say for example, si mommy o si daddy, they made love. So the sperm cell comes in here, and the sperm cells, daghan kay sila, millions of sperm cells will come in and then fertilize the egg. O kung mahitabo ang fertilization, mahimo na ni siyang zygote nga mo implant here. Maunang mubaga ang lining sa uterus to prepare for pregnancy. Pero kung walay fertilization nga mahitabo, meaning to say, walay lovemaking nga nahitabo o walay sperm cell nga nisulod, walay pregnancy nga mahitabo. Therefore, mubalik na punta sa first part of the cycle, which is called menstruation. Again, the 4 phases of menstruation are, let's see if you still remember, we have the menstruation, the follicular phase, and then we have the ovulation phase, and lastly, the luteal phase, where the egg cell waits for the sperm cell for it to be fertilized. Let's talk about the vocabulary you have to learn. We have estrogen. Estrogen is a primary female sex hormone that is responsible for the development and regulation of the female reproductive system and secondary sex characteristics. So this one controls most of the changes that happens in the female body. Now, by estrogen ang lalaki? Probably there might be. I am not so sure about this. But the main hormone for the males, for the females that really contribute to their pregnancy is called the progesterone. To define it, we have a hormone released by the corpus luteum to prepare for pregnancy. This is responsible for the thickening, ang pagtambok sa lining or pagbaga sa lining sa uterus in preparation for fertilization. And then we have here the word called follicle, a small secretory cavity, sac, or gland. Now, let us watch a specific video, something that we need to learn from. Okay, give me a few seconds. Okay, before we go to the assessment, let us go to the next part, which is equally important. We have this video. And I hope you will be able to hear. Before anything else, let me make sure that there is some sound. Let's start. This is the ovulation part.
Ovulation is a part of the menstrual cycle when the ovary releases a ripe egg, or ovum. Inside the ovary are hundreds of thousands of follicles. Each follicle is a hollow ball of cells with an immature egg in the center. The typical 28-day menstrual cycle begins on the first day of menstrual bleeding. During the first 7 days of the cycle, a few follicles begin to grow at the same time. These maturing follicles secrete estrogen hormone into the bloodstream to prepare the lining of the uterus for pregnancy. Around day 7, all of the follicles stop growing and begin to degenerate, except for one. This dominant follicle continues to grow and nourishes the developing egg inside it. Around day 12, the follicle secretes a large amount of estrogen into the bloodstream. When the estrogen reaches the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland in the brain, the anterior or front part of the pituitary gland releases a huge surge of luteinizing hormone into the bloodstream. Around day 14, luteinizing hormone causes the follicle to undergo a sudden growth spurt. Right before ovulation, the egg detaches from the inside of the follicle. The bulging follicle releases chemicals, causing one of the 2 fallopian tubes to move in closer and surround the follicle. The follicle swells until it bursts open, ejecting the egg and fluid from the follicle into the abdominal cavity. In response, the fimbriae, tiny projections at the end of the fallopian tube, sweep across the ovulation site and pick up the egg. Microscopic cilia on the fimbriae's surface transport the egg to the entrance of the fallopian tube. Inside the walls of the fallopian tube, muscular contractions gently push the egg towards the uterus. After ovulation, The egg lives for 12 to 24 hours, so it must be fertilized by a sperm from the male during this time for a woman to become pregnant. If it's not fertilized, the egg dissolves away and is shed along with the uterine lining during menstruation.
That is how ovulation happens. Later on, we will talk about the fertilization process, but we will not have enough time for that. So instead, let us talk about the assessment part. I think we are ready for it. Let's talk about the assessment. Again, estrogen, primary female sex hormone responsible for the development and regulation of the female reproductive system and secondary sex characteristics. Progesterone is the reason why the lining of the uterus gets thicker, mubaga, and follicle is a small secretory cavity, sac, or gland. We're almost done with this discussion. Here are ways to take care of the reproductive organs. Can you recall what these activities are? I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, very good. I hope you have your thoughts already. For both male and female, the reproductive health can be kept very well by taking a bath. Question, dapat ba nga maligo ang babae kung mag-menstruation siya? Yes. This is very important because during this period, this part of the female body is going to have blood, and blood is very attractive for bacteria. So if the girl doesn't take a bath, dili lang siya manimaho. Pwede pa nga magka-impeksyon ang iyahang bilahan. In the same way, males need to take a bath. This is because during puberty, your sweat glands are going to be so active to the extent that your body odor is going to come out already. Magsugod nagpanimaho ang imong ilok. For both boys and girls, wearing clean or nilabhan gyud nga mga underwear is very important. And take note, dili pwede maghuwam-huwam og brief og panty or bra for girls. It's also very important to keep yourself healthy by eating healthy food. So this is an example. We have gulay and meat. For girls, it's very important to eat food rich in iron because you're going to have to menstruate, magdugo ang imong uterus through the vagina, mugawa sa vagina. So you need to eat food rich in iron. We have enough sleep. For both male and female, it's important to have enough rest. But girls need this the most. Kaya kung dili sakto og tulog ang babae, dako kayog chances nga masakitan siya, magdysmenorrhea siya when she gets her menstruation during the month. It's also very important to have some exercise. Exercise, especially those, this one, running, and squats, for example, is very important for the females because this strengthens or exercises the pelvic floor. When we say the pelvic floor, mo ni siya ang dapit sa imong reproductive area. So kung strong siya, dako kayo chances na dili kayo sakit imong menstruation. Lastly, if you notice any difficulty or any change in your menstrual cycle or in your genitalia, your reproductive organ, your penis or your vagina, you have to inform your parents right away so that you can go to the doctor and so that the doctor can examine you. To sum this up, here are the things you need to remember. First, always keep your outer reproductive parts clean by washing it with mild soap and water. By mild soap, we have to use soap that has low or equal pH balance or acidity with our reproductive organ. For females, you can use lactacid, it's the mildest, or any similar soap, but we cannot use bar soap, that's unhealthy. Second, wear clean underwear as often as possible. Also, Have your own underwear. Never borrow from anyone because it is something personal. Ayaw paghulam-hulam. Labaw sa tanan, ayaw ibalik-balik imong underwear. That's very dangerous. It's going to infect your reproductive organ. Take a bath every day to make your body clean and healthy. Eat a balanced diet. Eat food rich in iron such as talbos sa kamote or dahon sa kanang kamote tops, I mean to say. 6, avoid salty food, especially for girls, because this can increase the pain when you have your period. 7th, have enough sleep and rest. 8th, have a regular exercise, especially before your period for the girls. Sit-ups and crunches are big help to avoid abdominal cramps. This will strengthen your abdomen. Ang parts sa body, diin na situate or gibutang ang atong reproductive organs. Lastly, consult your parents or doctors if you feel any discomfort with your reproductive organs. Time for the assessment. Let's answer the questions in your module now. Question number 1, which is also called blood flow? A, ejaculation. B, gestation. C, menstruation. D, ovulation. Isip-isip. Clue. Ato siyang gihisgutan karon nga discussion. So, duha lang ang atong gihisgutan, di ba? We did not talk about ejaculation or gestation. We talked about menstruation and ovulation. So, asa man aning duha ang relevant to the word or duol kaayo sa word nga blood flow? Number 2, it is the regular period a woman experience showing that their reproductive organs are healthy. Fertilization, menstruation, menstrual cycle, ovulation. Fertilization is from the word fertilize. Menstruation is from the word menstruate or bleed. Menstrual cycle gives us a notion that there is a cycle, okay? And then we have the ovulation, root word ovum. Number 3, in which phase does a female experience cramping and abdominal pains? Asa maka-experience og sakit nga puson ang babae? A, follicular. We're talking about phases. A, follicular. B, luteal. C, menstrual. Or D, ovulation. Abdominal pains, meaning to say dysmenorrhea. Does it happen in follicular, luteal, menstrual, or ovulation? 4, what do you call the lining of the uterus that thickens to receive a fertilized egg? Say tawag ato, ako itong gi-emphasize sa discussion. A, corpus luteum. B, endometrium. C, estrogen. D, progesterone. 5, it is the phase where mature egg is released from the ovary. Gikan siya sa ovary, moadto siya sa laing part sa reproductive health. Reproductive system. We have follicular, root word again is follicle. Luteal, root word luteum. Menstrual, root word menstruate. And ovulation, root word ovum. Number 6, in which phase does the lining of the uterus start to grow and develop? Okay, asa nga phase sa reproductive system, this is your uterus, does the lining of the uterus start to grow and develop? Mubaga siyag sugod. Asa man to nga part? A, follicular. B, luteal. C, menstrual. D, ovulation. 7, which phase comes after the ovulation phase? Gikan sa ovulation, unsa nay mahitabo? A, follicular. B, luteal. C, menstrual. and then ovulation. Kay gimension naman nato ang ovulation phase, pwede pa ba ni ma-answer? Dili na. So ang atong choices kay follicular, luteal, or menstrual. Number 8, when does fertilization take place? A, when the egg matures, kung matiguwang na ang egg. B, when the egg comes out, kung mugawas na ang egg. C, when the egg cell and sperm cell unite, kung mag-abot na ang egg o ang sperm cell. D, when the sperm dies. Number 9, what is referred to as menstrual cramp? Ako ning gibalik-balik ganiha. A, amenorrhea. B, dysmenorrhea. C, pregnancy. D, premenstrual stress. Number 10, the following are ways to take care of the reproductive organs except walay labot ang usa. 1. A, borrow your sister's underwear. Manghulam og underwear sa imong ate. B, consult your doctor. Mangayog tabang sa doktor kung may problema. C, use sanitary napkins when necessary. Mogamit og napkin pareha sa modes kung kinahanglanon. And letter D, wear clean underwear. Magsulob og limpyo nga underwear. I think you are ready to submit your module. Write your answers or finalize your answers in your notebook or your answer sheet before you submit that to your teacher. Thank you for listening to me and being with me in this very short discussion. I hope you understood something. Before we end the session, let me just define what menstruation is. Menstruation is the time when the uterus bleeds to begin the menstrual cycle. Menstruation is when the uterus sheds its lining and some blood to create the menstrual fluid that contains blood. Menstrual cycle has 4 phases. This is just a review. We have the menstruation phase, and then we have the follicular phase, followed by the ovulation phase, and then we have the luteal phase. Again, menstruation, follicular, ovulation, and luteal. Those are the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle. I hope you learned something. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day. Goodbye, everyone. This is Teacher Sydney signing off.